The Three Robes. Long, long ago, a king and a queen reigned over a large and powerful country. What their names were, nobody knows, but their son was called Sigurd, and their daughter was Aniek. But these young people were famed throughout the whole kingdom for their wisdom and beauty. There was only a year between them, and they loved each other so much they could do nothing apart. When they began to grow up, the king gave them a house of their own to live in, with servants and carriages and everything they could possibly want. For many years they lived happily together, and then the queen fell ill, and they knew she would never get better.
"Promise me two things,"
she said one day to the king.
"One, that if you marry again, as indeed you must, you will not choose as your wife a woman from some small state or distant island, who knows nothing of the world, and will be taken up with thoughts of her grandeur, but rather seek out a princess of some great kingdom who has been used courts all her life and holds them at her true worth. The other thing I have to ask is that you will never cease to watch over your children, who will soon become your greatest joy."
These were the queen's last words, and a few hours later she was dead. The king was so bowed down with sorrow that he could not attend even to the business of the kingdom, and at last his prime minister had to tell him that the people were complaining that they had nobody to right their wrongs. "You must rouse yourself, sir," went on the minister, "and put aside your own sorrows for the sake of your country." "You do not spare me," answered the king, "but what you say is just, and your counsel is good. I have heard that men say, likewise, that it will be for the good of the kingdom for me to marry again, though my heart will never cease to be with my wife. But it was her wish also, therefore to you I entrust the duty of finding a lady fitted to share my throne. Only see that she comes neither from a small town nor a remote island." So an embassy was prepared, and the minister at its head, to visit the greatest courts in the world, to choose out a suitable princess. But the vessel which carried them had not been gone many days, when a thick fog came on, and the captain could neither see nor the right nor to the left. For a whole month the ship drifted about in darkness, till at length the fog lifted, and they beheld a cliff jutting out just in front. On one side of the cliff lay a sheltered bay in which the vessel was soon anchored, and though they did not know where they were, at any rate they felt sure of fresh fruit and water. The minister left the rest of his followers on board the ship, and taking a small boat, rowed himself to land, in order to look about him and to find out if the island was really deserted as it seemed. He had not gone far when he heard the sound of music, and turning in its direction he saw a woman of marvelous beauty sitting on a low stool playing a harp, while a girl beside her sang. The minister stopped and greeted the lady politely, and she replied with friendliness, asking why he had been out in such an out-of-the-way place. In answer, he told her of the object of his journey.
"I am in the same state as your master," replied the lady. "I was married to a mighty king who ruled over this land, till Vikings came and slew him and put all the people to death. But I managed to escape and hid myself here with my daughter."
And the daughter listened, and said softly to her mother,
"Are you speaking the truth now?"
"Remember your promise," answered the mother angrily, giving her a pinch, which was unseen to the minister. "What is your name, madam?" he asked, much touched at this sad story.
Lava, she replied, and my daughter is called Lava.
Then she inquired the name of the minister, and of the king his master. After they talked of many things, the lady showed herself learned in all that a woman should know, and even in much that men only were commonly taught. "What a wife she will make for the king," thought the minister to himself, and before long he had begged the honor of her hand for his master. She declared at first that she was too unworthy to accept the position offered her, and that the minister would soon repent his choice. But this only made him more the eager, and in the end he gained her consent, and prevailed on her to return with him at once to his own country. The minister conducted the mother and daughter back to the ship. The anchor was weighed, and the sails spread, and the fair wind was behind them. Now that the fog had lifted, they could see as they looked back that, except just along the shore, the island was bare and deserted, not fit for men to live on. But about that, nobody cared. They had a quick voyage, and in 6 days they reached the land, and at once set out for the capital, a messenger being sent on first by the minister to inform the king of what had happened. When his majesty's eyes fell on the 2 beautiful women, clad in dresses of gold and silver, he forgot his sorrows and ordered preparations for the wedding to be made without delay. In his joy, he never remembered to inquire in what kind of country the future queen had been found. In fact, his head was so turned by her beauty of the 2 ladies that when the invitations were sent by his orders to all the great people in the kingdom, he did not even remember his 2 children, who remained shut up in their own house. After the marriage, the king ceased to have any will of his own, and did nothing without consulting his wife. She was present at all his councils, and her opinion was asked before making peace or war. But when a few months had passed, the king began to have doubts as to whether the minister's choice had really been a wise one, and he noticed that his children moved more and more in their palace, and never came near their stepmother. It always happened that if a person's eyes are once opened, they see a great deal more than they ever expected, and it soon struck the king that the members of the court had a way of disappearing one after another without any reason. At first he had not paid much attention to the fact, but merely appointed some fresh person to the vacant place. As, however, man after man vanished without leaving a trace, he began to grow uncomfortable and to wonder if the queen had anything to do with it. Things were in the state when one day his wife said to him that it was time for him to make progress through his kingdom, and that his governors were not cheating him of money that was his due.
"And you need not be anxious about going," she said, "for I will rule this country while you are away as carefully as you could yourself."
The king had no great desire to undertake this journey, but the queen's will was stronger than his, and he was too lazy to make a fight for it. So he said nothing and set about his preparations, ordering his finest ship to be made ready to carry him around the coast. Still, his heart was heavy, and he felt uneasy, though he could not have told why. And the night before he was to start, he went to the children's palace to take leave of his son and daughter. He had not seen them for some time, and they gave him warm welcome, for they loved him dearly, and he had always been kind to them. They had much to tell him, but after a while he checked their merry talk and said, "If I should never come back from this journey, I fear that it may be unsafe for you to stay here. So directly there are no more hopes of my return, go instantly and take the eastwards until you reach a high mountain, which you must cross. Once over the mountain, keep along by the side of a little bay till you come to two trees, one green and the other red, standing in a thicket, and so far back from the road that without looking for them, you would never see them. Hide each in the trunk of one of the trees, and there you will be safe from all your enemies. With these words, the king bade them farewell and entered sadly into his ship. For a few days the wind was fair and everything seemed going smoothly. Then suddenly a gale sprang up, and a fearful storm of thunder and lightning, such as never happened within the memory of the man. In spite of the efforts of the frightened sailors, the vessel was driven onto the rocks, and not a man on board was saved. That very night, Prince Sigurd had a dream in which he thought his father appeared to him in dripping clothes, and taking the crown from his head, laid it at his son's feet, leaving the room as silently as he had entered it. Hastily the prince awoke his sister Lineik, and they agreed to their father must be dead, and that they must lose no time in obeying his orders and putting themselves in safety. So they collected their jewels and a few clothes, and left the house without being observed by anyone. They hurried on till they arrived at the mountain without once looking back. Then Sigurd glanced round and saw that their stepmother was following them, with an expression on her face which made her uglier than the ugliest old witch. Between her and them lay a thick wood, and Sigurd stopped for a moment to set it on fire. Then he and his sister hastened on more swiftly than before, till they reached the grove with the green and red trees, into which they jumped, and felt at last that they were safe. Now, at that time there reigned over Greece a king who was very rich and powerful, although his name has also been forgotten. He had two children, a son and a daughter, who were more beautiful and accomplished than any Greeks had been before, and they were the pride of their father's heart. The prince had no sooner grown out of boyhood than he prevailed on his father to make war during the summer months on a neighboring nation, as to give him a chance of making himself famous. In winter, however, when it was difficult to get food and horses in that wild country, the army was dispersed, and the prince returned home. During one of these wars he had heard reports of the Princess Lineik's beauty, and resolved to seek her out and to ask her hand in marriage. All this Blavia, the queen, found out by means of her black arts, and when the prince drew near the capital she put a splendid dress upon her own daughter, and then went to meet her guest. She bade him welcome to her palace, and when they had finished supper she told him of the loss of her husband, and how there was no one left to govern the kingdom but herself. "But where is the Princess Lineik?" asked the prince, when she had ended her tale. "Here," answered the queen, bringing forward the girl whom she had hitherto kept in the background. The prince looked at her, and was rather disappointed. The maiden was pretty enough, but not much out of the common. "Oh, you must not wonder her pale face and heavy eyes," said the queen hastily, for she saw what was passing in his mind. "She has never got over the loss of both father and mother." "That shows a good heart," thought the prince, "and when she is happy her beauty will soon come back." And without any further delay he begged the queen to consent to the betrothal, for the marriage must take place in his own country. The queen was enchanted. She had hardly expected to succeed so soon, and she set at once to make her preparations. Indeed, she wished to travel with the young couple, to make sure nothing should go wrong. But here the prince was firm that he would take no one with him but Laufer, whom he thought was Linek. They soon took their leave of the queen and set sail in a splendid ship, but in a short time a dense fog came in, and in the dark the captain steered out of his course, and they found themselves in a bay which was quite strange to all the crew. The prince ordered a boat to be lowered, and went on shore to look about him. And it was not long before he noticed the two beautiful trees, quite different from any that grew in Greece. Calling out to the sailors, he bade cut them down and carry them on board the ship. This was done, and as the sky was now clear, they put out to sea and arrived in Greece without any more adventures. The news that the prince had brought home a bride had gone before them, and they were greeted with flowery arches and crowns of colored lights. The king and queen met them on the steps of the palace and conducted the girl into the woman's house, where she would have to remain until her marriage. The prince then went to his own rooms and ordered the trees should be brought into him. The next morning the prince bade his attendants to bring his future bride to his own apartments, and when she came he gave her such silk which she was to weave into 3 robes, one green, one red, and one blue. All these must be ready before the wedding. The blue one was to be done first, and the green last, and this was to be the most splendid of all, for I will wear it in our marriage, he said. Left alone, Laufer sat and stared at the heap of shining silk before her. She did not know how to weave, and burst into tears as she thought that everything would be discovered. For Lennox's skill in weaving was as famous as her beauty. And she sat down with her face hidden and her body shaken by sobs. Sigurd in the tree heard this and was moved to pity. "Leniet, my sister," he called. "Laufer is weeping. Help her, I pray you." "You have forgotten the wrongs her mother did to us," answered Leniet, "and that is owing to her that we are banished from home." But she was not really unforgiving, and very soon she slid quietly out of her hiding place, and taking the silk from Laufer's hands, began to weave it. So quick and clever was she that the blue dress was not only woven, but embroidered, and Leniac was safe back in her tree before the prince returned. "This is the most beautiful work I have ever seen," he said, taking up the bit, "and I am sure that the red one will be still better, because the stuff is richer." And with a low bow, he left the room. Laufer had hoped secretly that when the prince had seen the blue dress finished, he would have let her off the other 2. But when she found she was expected to fulfill the whole task, her heart sank and she began to cry loudly. Again Sigurd heard her and begged Leniec to come and help her, and Leniec, feeling sorry for her distress, wove and embroidered the second dress as she had done the first, mixing gold thread and precious stones until you could hardly see the red on the stuff. When it was done, she glided into her tree, just as the prince came in. "You're as quick as you're clever," he said admiringly. "This looks as if it had been embroidered by the fairies. But the green robe must outshine the other 2. I will give you 3 days in which to finish it. After it is ready, we will be married at once." Now, as he spoke, there rose up in Laufer's mind all the unkind things that her mother and she had done to Leniec. She could hope that they would be forgiven, and that Leniec would come and rescue her for a 3rd time. And perhaps Leniec, who had not forgotten the past either, might have left her alone to get the best she could. Not only Sigurd, her brother, implored her to help just once more. So Leniec slid out of her tree, and, to Laufer's great relief, set herself to work. When the shining green silk was ready, she caught the sun's rays and the moon's beams in the point of her needle, and wove them into a pattern such as no man had ever seen. But it took a long time, and on the third morning, just as she was putting the last stitches into the flower, the prince came in. Leniak jumped up quickly and tried to get past him to a tree, but the folds of silk were wrapped around her, and she would have fallen had not the prince caught her. "I have thought for some time that it was not all quite straight here," he said. "Tell me who you are and where you came from." Leniak then told her name and her story. When she ended, the prince turned angrily to Laufer and declared that, as punishment for her wicked lies, she deserved to die a shameful death. But Laufer fell at his feet and begged for mercy. It was her mother's fault, she said.
It was she, not I, who passed off as Princess Leniak. The only lie I ever told you was about the robes. I do not deserve death for that.
She was still on her knees when Prince Sigurd entered the room. He prayed the Prince of Greece to forgive Laufer, which he did, on the condition that Leniak would consent to marry him.
"Not till my stepmother is dead," she answered, "for she has brought misery to all that came near her."
Then Laufer told him that Blaver was not only the wife of a king, but an ogress who had stolen her from a neighboring palace and had brought her up as her daughter. And besides being an ogress, she was also a witch, and by her black arts had sunk the ship which the father of Sigurd and Leniak had set sail. It was she who had caused the disappearance of the courtiers, for which no one could account, by eating them at night. She hoped to get rid of all the people in the country, then to fill the land with ogres and ogresses like herself. So Prince Sigurd and the Prince of Greece collected his army swiftly and marched upon the town where Blavar held her palace. They came so suddenly that no one knew of it, and if they had, Blavar would have eaten most of the strong men, and others, fearful of something they could not tell about, had secretly left the place. Therefore, she was easily captured, and the next day was beheaded in the marketplace. After the two princes marched back to Greece. Leniak was no longer any reason for putting off her wedding, and married the Prince of Greece at the same time that Sigurd married the princess. Then Laufer remained with Leniak as her friend and sister, till they found a husband for her and a great nobleman, and all three couples lived happily until they died.